Are you sure you read that right, Joe? I mean, the whole story seems a little sus. There's a lot going on here. So first of all, you got Jesus gathered there with the folks, and then they bring this woman before him who was caught in the very act of adultery, which tells you right away this will not be a made-for-TV movie. It was the very act of adultery. And so they bring her in. Now here's the problem with it. You see, if they really were trying to enforce the law of Moses from Deuteronomy chapter 22 that has words to say about this, where's the dude? Oh, they brought her in, but because the whole law is that they both should be punished if they did this. So already you know this is not about doing what is right or what is just. This is all about trying to trap Jesus. And this woman is being used in this situation as a pawn. And then there's the whole thing about Jesus writing in the dirt. What is going on there? Like, over and over again, Jesus is like, hold on. And then comes back to, what is going on there? I mean, what's interesting about that is that people over the years have tried to make up all sorts. I know what Jesus was writing in the dirt. I know. He was writing out the sins of these Pharisees who came so that when he said, you without sin cast the first stone, he was kind of letting them know, I know what you did. I mean, that's a great story, but it's nowhere in the Bible, and somebody made that up. I didn't make it up. I just read it somewhere. So then then other people have come up with stuff. But at the end of the day, I think that it says Jesus was there teaching. And I don't know if you know this, but they didn't have chalkboards or whiteboards or PowerPoint back then. Not even paper to write out things and talk about with one another. So often a teacher would kneel down and would write things in the sand, in the dirt, so that they could convey an idea. So in my mind, what makes the most sense is that Jesus was just like, I'm not going to be in this nonsense. I'm going to just keep on doing what I was doing, which is teaching to these people. But they keep questioning him. And they're questioning because they know they're putting him in a weird spot. Or at least they think they are. Because they're lifting up the law of Moses and saying, you don't want to, the law says that she should be stoned for doing this. But if you say, yeah, we should go ahead and do that, well, then that's going to get him in trouble with the Roman authorities, because the Roman authorities don't take too kindly to religious leaders doing random stonings in the streets. So he's got this problem. If he says, no, you shouldn't stone her, well, now he's denying this law of God, which it's not quite what they're doing here. But if he says, yeah, go ahead and enforce it, well, now he's become the instigator of doing a capital punishment, which the Romans were not big fans of. But here's the deal. There are some things that you may have heard is like, oh, well, see, the Jewish people couldn't do capital punishment. The truth is, no, they could. They had to ask permission always, though, from the Roman occupying authorities to do it. But also, they didn't just grab somebody in the act and go, all right, let's do it now. To do it right, according to the justice, you had to have a whole council of up to 23 judges who would all hear the case, and the majority of them would have to agree that this offense actually happened. And furthermore, the first person to cast a stone is supposed to be the accuser, the one who saw them in the very act of adultery. But they haven't done what is right. They haven't run the justice the way it should be. And I know some of you might be caught up on what? We stone people for adultery? That seems extreme. You have to remember that the law of Moses that was put together was to guide a group of people who were wandering around in the desert with no justice system, no structure. Everything had to be about keeping the community together. And you know what breaks up a community really easily? Rampant adultery doesn't help. So there are certain things that they got very strict about because this could break community. But most of the laws of Moses were about restoring someone back into the community. But they did have some of these. But now you get to the time of Jesus. In the time of Jesus, there's plenty of justice system around. You got the Romans there. And because we believe that God reveals things over the course of history, you have Jesus who's kind of pointing out to them that maybe this isn't the right move at this time. He knows they haven't done due diligence. He knows there hasn't been any type of trial. They've just dragged this woman in front of him, and they're trying to trap him. And so he says, okay, whoever is without sin, you throw the first stone. Now that's a passage that we pluck out a lot by itself, right? You haven't maybe heard the whole story together, but you have heard, hey, any of you who don't have sin, you throw the first stone, meaning you shouldn't judge people if you got stuff in your own backyard, right? What this really is about Jesus taking this twisted situation and turning it back on the Pharisees. Now, one reaction Jesus could have had is like, you know what? The bigger offense is what you're doing to the law, twisting it just to trap me. Maybe we ought to pick up these stones and throw them at you, Pharisees. And Jesus doesn't do that. Instead, he makes them realize the hypocrisy of their action. He faces them with the situation, and they can't act. He hasn't fallen for the trap, and now they're in a trap. And the best thing they can do is just walk away. Now, at this point, could have been the end of the story. But see, so often, as what God takes is our brokenness and our messed upness and the crazy stuff we try to pull off and turns it into an opportunity for redemption, for renewal, for teaching. Because Jesus goes back to teaching. And as they all eventually depart, he then stands up and looks at the woman and says, anybody condemn you? And he says, no. She says, no. And he says, well, then neither do I. But let's not do that again. So, Jesus, in some way, knew that she was guilty. And yet he didn't seek to respond with some type of punishment or retribution. Instead, what he offered was grace and forgiveness and the opportunity to be restored to community. He broke that situation that was to condemn her and reestablish her in the community by pushing back the Pharisees' accusations, and then invited her to be part of that community again in a way that didn't tear it apart. And that's what justice is really about in the gospel of Jesus Christ, and is that all that we seek to do is to create a healing, to restore people to wholeness, because all this that happens in the world, all the that's happening in the world, comes out of the brokenness of you and I, of people around us. The people who do these horrible things are messed up. And what they need is a restoration. And sometimes what's needed in the situation is forgiveness. It's looking for the opportunity to create community again, even in the face of a known wrong, to create community again. Oh, but sometimes though, right? Sometimes it feels like those people do not deserve forgiveness. What about when someone is just doing harm again and again and again, doing evil again, and again? And I mean, do we just let that go? Because I can't throw my stone. I've got some sins, so I'm just going to let that happen. No. We're meant to step in, but not looking for the righteousness, that righteous anger that sometimes we seek to use. But instead, what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called, more along with an impatience for justice. We should be impatient for justice to happen, but not seeking a righteous anger. We should look for ways that we can restore the situation. But sometimes there are people, though, who are so destructive, who seem to not be sorry at all. And what do we do in those situations? We can get angry, but anger is a touchy thing, because what anger does is it eats at us. If you go back to the story of Cain and Abel, Cain has a real problem that this is back in Genesis, first book of the Bible. Cain has a really problem that Abel's offerings are getting accepted by God better than his, and he starts to get angry. And what God says to Cain is like, whoa, Cain, you got to be careful, because that anger that's in you, it's creeping at the door, and it's ready to pounce on you. Because what anger does is it causes us to get ugly, to be less than our very best self. And when we're acting out of anger, it's not often goodness that flows out. And it isn't often even justice that flows out. It's just anger. I learned this lesson quite well when I was in about 4th or 5th grade. We were it was a youth group trip, and my parents were youth group leaders, so I got to go on all the stuff even though I was a 4th or 5th grader. There was another family that was helping out with youth groups, so their kids got to go. They had kids about the same age. And one of them, Ronnie, used to always buddy up with the other kids in the youth group. It seemed like the high schoolers liked Ronnie better than they liked me. So that made me feel kind of bad. We're riding on the bus to this event, and I was in about the 3rd or 4th row of the church bus, and Ronnie was back there with some of the high schoolers way in the back. And I was just sitting there, minding my own business, and all of a sudden, something hit the back of my head. And I look around, and there's nothing. And then I hear this little giggling from the back. And then another one right in the back of my head. And it falls down, and I look at it, and it's a starburst. And I will tell you that a starburst hurts. And I turn around and say, cut it out. And then they laughed at me. Now, I was not always the grace, love, and peace pastoral presence you see before you. This did not turn into me channeling the Spirit of Christ. I was looking for the cup of wrath to pour out. I got so angry that I just sat there. And sure enough, a couple minutes later, hit again. Right in the center of the back of my head. Another one falls down. So, I decided it was time to throw stones, or rather starburst. So I reached down and I picked up that starburst, and I looked around, and I knew it was Ronnie doing it. And I just whipped it at him as hard as I could, with all the force I had in my hands. The problem is that my accuracy with the starburst did not match Ronnie's. It completely missed them. It went up and it hit the roof of the bus and fell down the back, and they just laughed all the more. And it just kept up, one after another. I couldn't believe this was happening. I also couldn't believe he was that accurate with a starburst. And with the laughter and the starburst, I lost it. I mean, biblical kind of lost it. I got up out of my seat and I started running towards Ronnie. And I was screaming. I was growling. There was an animal coming outside of me. And I was, I'm yelling and I'm running. And then I got this idea. When I got about 2 rows away from him, I just leapt in the air at him with my hands out like this. In my mind, I was going to land right on his throat. I don't know what I was going to do, but it wasn't Jesus-inspired. I leapt. And just before I got to him, Doug Hunter pops out of the seat. Evidently, between where I jumped and where Ronnie was Doug Hunter seated there, who was in the youth group, and he just reached out and he caught me midair. He caught me midair. And he pulled me back into the seat. And then my fury went towards Doug. I was so mad. But he was very strong. I didn't realize how strong Doug Hunter was. And he held me. He was like like this vice kind of grip around me. And his mouth was like kind of near my ear. And he just kind of said real softly, not making a scene to everyone else and saying it, but just in my ear, he goes, "You don't want to do that." And I was like, "Yes, I do. Yes, I do." And he just kept saying it in my ear over and over again. "You don't want to do that. You don't want to do that." And eventually, I calmed down. And he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah." And I got up and I went back to my seat. The lesson of this story is, don't be a Rob, be a Doug. Because the anger that was in me was making me do something that I shouldn't be doing. It wasn't right what was being done to me, but what I was about to do was wrong. I was letting anger shape who I was and who I would be. And what Doug did is he saw a wrong. I don't know, maybe he didn't see the Starburst thing happening. I don't know. But he saw a wrong about to happen. And he wasn't trying to punish me. He wasn't trying to hurt me. He was trying to restore me. Restore me to my right mind. Restore me to that community, because what would have happened if I went hogtown on Ronnie? Nothing good. We have to be careful in our response to wrongdoing and sin that we don't become part of that. Galatians chapter 6 warns us about this, that we're to correct others with gentleness, but be careful that it doesn't cause you to enter into sin as well. And this takes an incredible amount of discipline. It's not easy being a Christian because you have to stand up for what is right. You have to not let sin go. But we also are called to not let anger run the day, to not let someone else's brokenness turn me into something ugly, to make every word I say sound like the words of God being spoken, to make every action out of the very heart and inspiration of what the Spirit really intends for me to do. And that is hard. But guess what, people? Being a Christian ain't easy. I'd like to tell you that I have forgiven Ronnie. I'll leave it at that. No, I mean, we're kids, right? We're kids. We're stupid kids doing stupid things. And sometimes stupid kids grow up to be stupid adults doing stupid things. And we're broken. And who knows why we are the way we are. But at the end of the day, let us be careful not to be so quick to pick up a stone, but instead to look where we can be part of a healing and a restoration, of kindness and mercy, to tend to those who are hurt, but not to be someone who hurts others. Because that's not the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's the path to our destruction. And even though it's hard, we're better than that. May God be glorified by the way you find peace in being a follower of Jesus. Hallelujah. Amen.